I'd like to talk now a little bit about 9/11 truth. To start off, I will say that in the broadest sense, I don't agree with most of the conclusions of 9/11 truth. I know that it's an extremely broad category, and there's probably, I mean, I'm aware of many, many, many theories, and there's probably far more that I'm not aware of. But I think that ultimately a terrorist organization, uh, more or less called Al Qaeda, although that is itself actually a kind of a tricky characterization, is responsible for the attack and not directly, anyway, the United States government. However, I will say that for many years I got very interested in it um, around 2002, 2003, and stayed interested in it for 4 or 5 years. And during that time, I consumed all the material I possibly could on the matter. Um, I can't say that I watched every single documentary, but every single documentary that I ever knew about, I watched. So, Who Killed John O'Neill and Loose Change, and probably a whole bunch of other ones I don't remember the names. And for 2 or 3 years there in the mid aughts, I was a paid subscriber to Prison Planet, I'll admit. And but as I became more interested in libertarianism and libertarian theory, I became less interested in 9/11 truth. And uh, here's why: the even if you look at the official story, that Al Qaeda did it, that in and of itself is enough condemnation of the government to uh, basically reject all of the subsequent activities of the government, which is what, I mean, 9/11 truthers will say, well, this whole thing was uh, designed to enable all these, the wars and the Patriot Act and the police state and all these other things. And the truth is that even if Al Qaeda is guilty of doing it, uh, all those activities would have been unjustified anyway. So it's not of great practical importance who actually did it. Now, as a historian, I think that's an interesting question, and it's worth looking into, and I'm certainly open. And there's lots of things I do wonder about. We'll never get the whole story, as Ron Paul says. The government, if it knows anything that incriminates it at all, even if it shows that it's derelict, it will not put it together. The problems with the government is that even though it has this vast apparatus for uh, obtaining information, there's no way for it to sift through it and really come to any meaningful conclusions. But uh, Part of the reason I'm saying this is I just read a book on the wars in Afghanistan prior to 9/11. The book starts with the Soviet invasion and ends on September 10th, 2001, which is significant because that was the day Ahmad Shah Massoud was assassinated, who was, I don't know if this is really true, but the impression of him in the United States and actually through most of the West is that he was quite possibly the greatest military genius alive, certainly in Afghanistan, and he was an enemy of the Al Qaeda backed Taliban. He was a Muslim, but he was against them. Anyway, he was assassinated the day before 9/11. Although actually, assassinations attempts against him have been ongoing for a long time. Anyway, uh, if you read that book and if you really look into the evidence, people like Michael Scheuer and the Bin Laden unit of the CIA and uh, any number of other people, former ambassadors to Pakistan, had been saying for years that Osama bin Laden was a big threat and that he was going to try and do something as destructive as possible. And I remember before 9/11 actually watching one or two documentaries on TV that summer, actually talking about how bin Laden was poised to do as much damage as possible. And we know why. He's mad about U.S. foreign policy, as he should have been. Now, did he uh, go about dealing with it the right way? No. In fact, he has dealt with it in a stupid way because his actions have empowered the U.S. government. They haven't hurt the U.S. government at all. Uh, the other thing, a lot of 9/11 truthers are convinced that bin Laden worked for the CIA. As far as I'm aware, that's not really true. During the war and during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, obviously the United States was aiding certain segments against the Soviets, although mostly our aid went through Pakistan through the ISI, and basically we were subsidizing their favorites, which is part of the problem because Pakistan favored the more religious-oriented rebels as opposed to the more secular ones like, say, Massoud, or the Shiite ones in Herat. And there were people in the United States who thought, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing this because some of the people that the Pakistanis are funding consider us just as evil as the Soviets, and ultimately their fears were not acted on. The State Department and the military just said, well, we're not that worried about it. We just want to kill Soviets. And anyway, bin Laden was with all along with all our money going in, many of the Gulf states, especially Saudi Arabia, but also uh, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Bahrain, were spending a lot of money of their own because they were against communism, and they also wanted to foster a Sunni Islamic state next to Iran because next to Russia, they also did not like the Shiites in Iran. And bin Laden was one of many sheiks taking part in this, and in that capacity, the CIA was aware of who he was and what he was doing, and had no problem with it because he was helping fight the Soviets also, mostly by spending a lot of his own money, not so much at that time because he was running trading camps or whatever. He didn't start doing that till later. But that does not mean he was working for the CIA. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible that it never happened, but as far as I'm aware, no records of it have ever been uh, shown. That the claim is basically a guilt by association. He fought the Soviets, the CIA fought the Soviets, hence he's their agent. The other thing is they say that he's dead, that he died of kidney failure. He did have health problems, as best we can tell, although the specific nature and severity of them is not clear. The reports that he died originate from the ISI, Pakistani intelligence, and from uh, Prince Faisal Turkai, the head of the intelligence of Saudi Arabia. And the thing about that is Saudi Arabia and Pakistani intelligence have repeatedly lied to the U.S. about goings on in Afghanistan, and in particular about Osama bin Laden, because they're aware that we don't like him, we didn't like him, but they did like him, and so it's very not. When I say like, I don't mean that they secretly are in alliance with him, but that they didn't have the problems with him that we did, and they were inclined on several occasions, not just in regards to bin Laden, but in regards to Afghanistan and generally, to tell us things that they think would ameliorate our objections that we might have. So the fact that they say he was dead or died soon after 9/11, that's dubious. It's possible. Not everything ISI and Saudi intelligence has said is a lie, but they have ulterior motives there. So uh, there's that. The other thing is that a lot of these conspiracy theory people really kind of bug me. They watch one or two documentaries and they think they know it all. And you'll see this a lot if you watch any videos about politics, and I'll get comments like this, like it's all the New World Order or whatever, and like, I mean, these people you can't prove, and you can't. Their beliefs aren't falsifiable in a lot of those. Every single political figure. The fact that Ron Paul isn't dead proves that he's an NWO plant, and uh, I don't know. I just saw a comment saying that Lincoln and JFK both opposed the Fed, and they both got assassinated. Hence, and it was just stupid because there was no Fed when Lincoln was president, and his monetary policies were actually proto central banking. He actually kind of, after the Jacksonian destruction of the second bank of the United States, Lincoln basically put into motion the precursors of the Fed. So I don't see how he was an anti-Fed president. I don't really see how JFK was either. I think the whole silver certificate thing is way, way overblown. Um, but to a lot of these people, it's just there's this mysterious dark enemy, and anytime anything happens, they're behind it. And so, if anybody dies, that must be because they were opposed to it, and hence a good guy. So, JFK and Lincoln are both laudable presidents, even though Lincoln was a bloodthirsty tyrant, worse than any other U.S. president, quite frankly. Sometimes I have a little soft spot in my heart because I think he was doing it because he thought it was for the best, but obviously he was wrong. And then JFK is the most overrated person in U.S. history. I mean, he's attributed things that are basically the opposite of what he did. Now, I'm not saying he's the worst president, not by far, but I don't know, because he got assassinated, which I'm sure it was a conspiracy that he was assassinated. I'm not sure who did it, but uh, he that doesn't mean that he was opposed to the Fed or the bankers or the Rothschilds. Um, the other point about 9/11, Lou Rockwell calls it Federal Failure Day, and that's the whole. I think that's the main lesson to be drawn here. That even if we accept the entire story, uh, here we have a government that all they do is, and whenever you get in debates, this is all you ever hear. Well, we need them to protect us. We need them to protect us. We need it. The taxation is justified because they protect us, and it's this public good, this defense. And when it comes right down to it, they can't even deliver on that promise, and it's not a promise because it's not binding. Nobody got fired because of 9/11. No one lost their jobs. In fact, they all got pay raises and promotions, and they all got more power. Uh, and that's absolutely ludicrous. Uh, and that's the main lesson to be learned from 9/11. Not Not that and don't get me wrong, I'm not someone who says, oh, the government wouldn't kill its own people. Obviously, I think the government would kill its own people. It's done it before. It reserves the right to do that. It basically explicitly says that it has the right to. I mean, if you have any ideology that's based on quote unquote the common good, implicit in that is the idea that killing any number of individuals is justified if the circumstances permit. And what circumstances are those? Well, whatever the government says. We don't have a government that says, well, explicitly we exist to defend the rights of the individuals, and those are sacred, and we'll never ever, by any means, infringe upon them. And if we did, that would be grounds to abolish us. They don't take that position. They never do. Uh, if you read the Constitution, I guess you could say that it maybe implies that in some places, but the government explicitly denies that interpretation and goes with the we own you because we're the government view of things. So, 9/11 Truth I think is pretty interesting, and I said I had a lot of fun, if that's the right word, looking into it. But ultimately, I don't think. I mean, Scott Horton says it pretty well. He goes, I think what these people don't understand is that there really are people who hate the United States. And this is something even Alex Jones has admitted. I've heard him say, "Are there Muslims out there who will kill you for not converting?" Yes, there are. And that doesn't mean we should be threatened by them because that's only a small group or whatever. And Al Qaeda, even as it, I mean, the other point is that the reason Al Qaeda hates us is because of what the government does, not because the women don't wear burqas or anything of that nature. I mean, maybe they don't like that, but no one's willing to kill themselves over something like that, or very few people. Uh, so, 9/11 Truth kind of misses the point. I know that the impulse to think it's really, really vital that people believe that it was the government because uh, that will, I mean, that would be a kind of an iconoclastic event, but not necessarily because if you conclude that, well, the government just was run by evil conspirators, then if you still believe in government, your likely response is, well, we just need to get new, better people in there. We just need more democracy or whatever, which is a frequent, although not ubiquitous, theme in a lot of this, is that if only we had more voting and whatever. And then this wouldn't happen. Of course, that's false. It's faith in government that makes us vulnerable to this sort of thing, and it's support of the government that provokes this sort of thing, even if the government itself is not guilty of the attack. So, I mean, it's just like Pearl Harbor. The government didn't have build a fake Japanese fleet, but it didn't need to. It was still culpable because it uh, provoked the Japanese with a very aggressive foreign policy, all the while maintaining that it was just being a neutral player, and when it was really not. And so it's the case here. Most Americans think that we were just minding our own business, and then these crazy people attacked us when this, of course, is not true. And there's a reason we were attacked. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm saying I understand that it happened. And I also understand that the government is completely powerless. And all the alleged plots that they've stopped since then, all of them have either been stopped by civilians or the plot was provocateured by the government. And that part is true. And that's not even a conspiracy theory because they will typically admit, oh, the FBI got this guy to say he wanted to blow up a building. They gave him a couple bags of fertilizer and then they arrested him 5 minutes later. And then they spend the rest of the week patting themselves on the back for protecting it, which is silly. So.